Zhiyuan Wang, who has a great sense of playfulness and humor. So in the program, he also calls himself Platow Wong. Platow, Platow. It's a kind of play on Plato, right? So his stage name is Plato, uh, but he's really Zhiyuan. He has a PhD in philosophy from Nanjing University, which is the Chinese Ivy League. It's one of the top philosophy departments in the country. He's a professor of philosophy, a philosophical counselor, a life mentor, and a core member of the Nanjing School of Philosophical Consulting, founded by Professor Tian-Kun Pan, who's a great pioneer in China of humanities therapy and other things. As a visiting scholar, Zhiyuan has done some important research works on philosophical practice at CCNY. He and another colleague from Nanjing, namely Weiguo Xia, were both visiting scholars at CCNY City College, where I worked during 2016 to 17. And they really did a lot of excellent research while here and subsequently have published some of it. He has expertise, Zhiyuan does, in existential therapy, logotherapy, cognitive therapy, and has helped more than 1,000 people with their life problems in less than a decade that he's been doing this in China. So, Karen, he doesn't have any problem finding clients. Maybe you should take spend some time in China and see how he manages to do this. He's very active and in not a very populous area either. He's written 4 books on philosophical practice in Chinese. We look forward eventually to seeing some of them in English, but their English titles are Diagnosis and Treatment on Life Problems, To Search for the Meaning of Life, Looking Up at the Stars at Café. He runs philosophy cafes as well. Uh, the Consolation of Life, and I Am Waiting for You at Café, which is his 5th book now in process. So he's very active, very energetic. He's a wonderful philosopher. And without further ado, allow me to share his video with you. Okay, it's about 40 to 45 minutes. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat room or just email them directly to Zhiyuan. I will put his email in the chat room for you, and I think it's also in the program. Okay, so allow me to cue this up and we'll get rolling.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to meet you all in this way and share some of my thoughts on philosophical practice. Many thanks to APPA, to Marinov, and to all of you joining online. Today, I will share with you the topic, Living a Happy Life according to Aristotelian thought, which is directly related to his theory of the 4 causes. Let me explain something about this article. It's adapted from a philosophical dialogue I had with a client. You could think of it as a form of philosophical practice. Of course, as you know, philosophical dialogue is something deeply meaningful, with roots going all the way back to ancient Greece. But I believe that even without obvious philosophical elements, conversation itself is quite interesting. Even today, even everyday gossip can be a good thing. It can influence people in some way, at least making them feel happier in the moment. And if it brings them joy, that at least means philosophical counseling had some temporary effect. So one of the most important ways human thought progress is through dialogue, and dialogue can take many different forms. Alright, let's get back to today's topic. My core idea today is this. Aristotle's theory of the 4 causes is truly a brilliant concept. It gives us a vivid way to understand how the world is ever-changing, full of different possibilities. But the driving force behind realizing these possibilities might ultimately be something like God, not the things themselves. Yet, humans are a fascinating species. We can think, reflect on ourselves, and in doing so, we change and shape who we are. For Aristotle, the ultimate shaper of all things was God. Even if he didn't say it outright, but personally, I believe we are our own sculptors. Humans shape themselves. We are our own God. Now, let me break this down a little further. And today, we have 4 parts. Part 1, Introduction. Part 2, the 4 causes of Aristotle. Part 3, how to live a happy life according to Aristotle. And part 4 is concluding remarks. And now, we go on with part 1. Part 1, Introduction. Let me tell you about my client, Fish. After reading Aristotle's work for several days and doing some thinking, he scheduled a chat with me. We ended up talking for almost an entire afternoon at a nice cafe. To some extent, he deeply admires Aristotle. He actually quoted Bertrand Russell, saying that compared with his predecessors, Aristotle's merits are enormous, but compared with his successors, his demerits are also enormous. During the 2,000 years after his death, there was no any philosopher in the world who could approximately be his equal, and in almost every area, such as science and philosophy, his authority was unquestionable, just as that of church. After this long period of time, almost every advance in serious intellect began with an attack on some of Aristotelian doctrines. He went on to give me a quick rundown of Aristotle's life. About 384 BC, he was born in Thrace. He was sent to the academy in Athens and became one of Plato's students at about the age of 18. In 343 BC, he became tutor of Alexander for about 3 years. He continued. During 12 years, studied from 335 BC, Aristotle lived in Athens. He founded his school, Lyceum, and wrote most of his books. When Alexander was died in 323 BC, Athenians rebelled. They thought Aristotle was impiety. When heard of this, unlike Socrates, he ran away. His nice reason was that he didn't want the Athenians commit a crime of killing philosopher once again. Actually, although her description of Aristotle's life was brief, that final line made it truly significant. From her introduction, we learned that Aristotle didn't want the Athenians commit a crime of killing philosopher once again. Aristotle's attitude toward death remains unclear to us, but I believe he most likely didn't fear it. What truly concerned him was failing to fully realize one's potential. he maintained that only when a thing achieves its complete development can its true nature be revealed. Or we might say, it's through complete development that a thing acquires its essential nature. This philosophical perspective of his once inspired me to compose a poem, attempting to capture and reflect upon this idea. Here's what I wrote, and now I recite the poem for all of you. The blossoming of being. In the quiet cradle of existence, where seeds of potential lie, a truth unfolds, profound and clear. Only in full bloom do we draw near to the essence of what we are, the hidden light, the distant star. A flower cloaked in tender green, whose secrets yet unseen, its petals called, a promise kept, until the sun has fully stabbed upon its face, and then behold, the beauty of its soul is told. For who could know it was a flower, had it not met its destined horror, and burst in glory, wild and free, upon the hillside for all to see? So to the child, in innocence, walks a path of present tense, unburdened by the weight of years, unmarked by joy, unscared by tears. We call him pure, we call him whole, yet know not at his truest role, alive in all its depths and strife, carves the essence from the life. Without the trials, without the pain, the soul remains a mere refrain, a melody note fully sung, a story left in part unsung. Aristotle, wise, did once declare, the state is man's full bloom, laid bare. Yet here we pause and gently say, the rose is a rose in every day, but man is more than humankind. He is a seeker, he is a finder. In each alone the essence lies, not in the mass, but in the eyes that search for meaning, truth, and light through every shadow, every night. But in the journey, not the end, we came to know the self, the friend. The process shapes, the process molds, the essence that the heart beholds. Before the essence comes the strife, the winding road, the thread of life, and only when the path is trod, we return at last to God, to see in full what we have been, and know the truth of where we've seen. So, let the flower bloom in time, and let the soul through life climb. For in the fullness we shall see the beauty of our destiny, the process first, the essence then. This is the way for flowers and men. However, Aristotle's act of escaping subtly reveals his stance on the mind-body relationship, a perspective that has shaped my own views, which I consistently share with my clients. My position is this. A person consists of two parts, the physical and the mental. The former serves as the necessary condition for the latter's existence. Without the body, there would be no mind, or at least no continuing mind. It having a body doesn't guarantee the presence of the thought. This aligns with the predominant behavioral philosophy in traditional Chinese culture, encapsulated in the saying, "As long as the green mountains remain, we need not fear running out of firewood. Without the mountains, we lose all resources. They provide. But with the mountains intact, trees, springs, wild fruits, animals, all these natural gifts will follow." The same principle applies to human existence. Without the body, that is, in depth, what remains for a person, what potential for development exists. Hence, I often tell my clients, some people, though alive, are already dead. Some people, when dead, are truly gone. Fish showed particular interest in self-development when she asked how to develop oneself. I advised her to study Aristotle's theory of the four causes. And next, we go on with part 2, the four causes of Aristotle. Actually, Aristotle's theory of the four causes is quite straightforward to understand. For Aristotle, nature is teleological. It directs entities towards their proper ends. For example, an apple says nature is to grow into an apple tree. Motion involves 3 principles. 1. Matter. The underlying substrate that persists through change. And 2. Form. The actualized state of a thing. And 3. Privation. The absence of form that a thing out possesses. Motion is thus the fulfillment of potentiality. For instance, water's natural state is cool. Its privation is cold. When cold, water becomes ice. Conversely, ice privation is warm. Ice privation is warmth, leading it to revert to water. Later, Aristotle formally introduced the theory of the four causes. The four causes are matter, form, efficiency, and final goal. Take carving as an example. According to his theory, matter is copper, form is a model of sculpture, efficiency is the sculptor, and the final goal is the sculptor itself. So Aristotle identifies 4 causes. 1. Material cause, which means is the substance from which something is made. 2. Formal cause, the structure or essence. 3. Efficient cause, the agent of changing. And 4. Final cause, the purpose. During our conversation, I told Fish that after first reading Aristotle's theory of the 4 causes years ago, I had a remarkably strange dream that same night. Though peculiar, I felt it was deeply connected to his philosophy. Later, I transformed this dream into a poem and developed some original interpretations of my own. And now, I will recite the poem for all of you. And now, I will recite the poem for all of you. The Dream of Creation, a poem on art and becoming. Last night, a dream was long and deep. Two scenes emerged as if to keep a tale of art, of life, of birth, of forms that rise from ancient earth. In one, a palace, grand and bright, its halls ordered with pure delight. The sculpture stood of land and stream, of flowers, birds, and leaves that seem to wake, to move, to breathe, to be, as if by some strange alchemy. In one dim corner, robed in white, unnoticed worked his beard aright, his beard alight. With wisdom's glow, his eyes like suns, his hands that shaped what time had done. With the chisel's touch, he carved with care a figure bold, a knight, a rare, and a noble form, half finished now, it clearly marked by the dreams and now. The artist's power, swift, divine, brought forth the night as if by sign. The figure blinked, it turned its head, it looked around, and then it said, "This is the world worth living in." Then paced the hall, a clock walked in. In second scene, by river's edge, within a grove, on nature's ledge, a stone half formed, half human stood. Its hand held tools, its work was good. With every strike, it seems to feel a pain upon a wound, a seal. Its face contracted, it pressed through time, through toil, through endless test. At last, a cry, a shout, "It's done!" The figure rose beneath the sun, with light that shone, with music's grace, a knight emerged and took his place. Awake, I pondered what I'd seen. The palace night, the grove's scene, the grove's serene. The first was made, the second was wrought. Through pain, through will, through battles of fought. And so I felt within my heart, the grove's night stood, a work of art. But though the palace form was grand, it lacked the touch of its own hand. The grove's night bore the marks of strife, the scars, the toil, the price of life. Its pain, its struggle, made it true, a being shaped by what it knew. So too with us, we carve our way, through nights, through days, through disarray. The forms we take, the lives we lead, are born of both the wound and seed. But in the struggle, in the fight, we find our shape we find our light. And though the path may twist and bend, we rise, we believe, we transcend. The dream has passed, it stays. A lesson learned, a guiding phrase. To be is not just to made. To be is not just to be made, but to endure, to not evade. But in the pain, in every tear, we find the life, we hold it dear, and in the end, we come to see the art of life is to be free. So, thanks to the 4 courses, we now know why things move and change. Aristotle posits that everything had a natural position when displaced. An internal force restores equilibrium. This concept extends metaphysically. Sublunary world, characterized by generation and decay, and the second was the heavenly realm, eternal and unchanging, moved by the unmoved mover, which is God, maybe you know, a pure form and thought thinking itself. We can't be certain whether this distinction truly holds, but what resonates more strongly is happiness as the ultimate good, even though he also argued happiness is a life lived in accordance with virtue and wisdom. And here, what I mean is that clients' happiness should ideally stem from within themselves. And part 3 is how to live a happy life according to Aristotle. I'm sorry, the word life is missing. Okay, I told the fish, achieving happiness requires practical wisdom, which involves 1. Deliberation, and 2. Choice. To operationalize Aristotle ethics, we propose the following steps. 1. Identify a privation, which means recognize a lacking form, and 2. Determine the final goal. This is to make people to define the desired state. And 3. Deliberate means use the practical wisdom to evaluate options. And 4. Choose the best alternatives. And what we should do is to select the most virtuous action. And 5. Act rationally. Implement the chosen path. Here we have a case, and here we have a case example. Consider a person who fears public speaking, which means privation is confidence. A person should do the following. 1. To find the goal. This is to speak confidently. And 2. Deliberation. Practice training or need a mentorship. And 3. Choice. For example, enroll in a speaking course. And 4. Action. Gradually improve through rational effort. And I think I should give you another example. This example is about my classmate. I think there will be many coincidences and unexpected encounters in life. That day at gym, I unexpectedly met a college classmate whom I hadn't seen in over a decade. He is no longer as plump as she used to be, presenting a stunning beauty of fitness. She told me that it took 3 years to shape who she is today. Everyone has their own material, which is the physical body we are born with. Despite differences in height, weight, and thickness, her repeated sweating exercise was the driving force behind her shaping her current physique. All the efforts, all the sweat, her purpose is to tell the world that she can't do it. The focuses of material, formal, efficient, and final vividly illustrated her existence over the past 3 years. The existence of these 3 years is her physical self-shaping, which is completely different from the sculpture activities of the sculptor. The sculptor's object is external, while she sculpts herself. And here I also have a poem for all of you. The sculptor of self. Life is a tapestry of chance, of moments unplanned, encounters unforeseen. That day in gym, amidst the clan of weights and hum of treadmills, I met her. At a college classmate, unseen for over a decade, gone with the softness of youth, replaced by sculpted grace, a testament to years of sweat and will. No longer driven by the rush of hormones, I marveled at the beauty before me, not as desire, but as pure admiration. He spoke of 3 long years of discipline, of struggle, of transforming the raw material of her body into a form he had envisioned. Her sweat, her effort, a relentless force, shaping her into who she had become. Each of us is born with a form, a body of flesh and bone, unique in its dimensions, yet malleable in its potential. He had taken hers and through sheer will carved it into something extraordinary. Her goal was clear, to show the world, to show herself that he could be more, that he could be beautiful. Material, force, form, purpose. These were the pillars of her existence, the essence of her 3-year journey. But hers was no ordinary sculpture, unlike the artist who shapes clay or stone. Her medium was her own flesh, her own being. She was both the sculptor and the sculpted, the creator and the creation. what makes a person who they are, not the body alone, but what lies beyond it. The body carries the mind, the soul, the spirit. These are what makes us human, and yet many turn away from the flesh, seeking to shape themselves in thought, in soul, in spirit. They too have their forces, their purpose, but what of their material, what of their form? He stood before me, a living testament to the power of will, to the beauty of self-creation. Her body, once mere matter, had become a work of art, a declaration of her existence, and as I watched her, I wonder, what form do I seek? What force drives me? What material do I shape? And to what end? Perhaps we are all sculptors, carving ourselves from the raw stuff of life. Some shape their bodies, others their minds, still others their souls, but in the end, it is not the form that matters, but the act of creation itself, the relentless pursuit of becoming. For in that pursuit, we find our purpose, our truth, our beauty. He left the gym that day, her form a beacon of what is possible, and I, inspired by her journey, turned to my own, for we all works in progress, shaping ourselves day by day into who we are meant to be. And now is the last part, part 4, concluding remarks. Motion, in Aristotelian terms, refers to the change of an entity with an invariable career from one state to another. Essentially, it is the actualization of potentiality. Every entity possesses a privation, a lack of a form it ought to have, which drives perpetual change. Human actions aim at goodness, with happiness being the natural and highest good. Unlike inert matter, humans are active agents guided by rationality or himself. Through practical and theoretical wisdom, human existence can progressively improve, leading to happiness. And finally, I'd like to share one more poem with all of you. Although it was originally written for my child Jack and reflects Locke's philosophy, its message transcends these origins to offer universal insight into life. A canvas of your life. My dearest child, so pure, so new, the world awaits, it calls to you. You came unmarked, a blank, a white slate, a soul untouched by time or fate. The world will cast its light and shade, its colors bright, its shadow laid. What it reflects, you will come to own, and through its lens, you will be shown. I see you as a canvas bare, a work of art beyond compare. Within my hands, I hold the brush to paint the world with love's soft hush. I will sketch the mountains, tall and grand. The ocean's vast, the golden sand. I will paint the stars, the moon's soft glow, the flowers bloom, the rivers flow. Each stroke will be a gift, a prayer, a hope to guide, a dream to share. For you, my child, are meant to be a masterpiece of destiny. But as you grow, the time will come to take the brush, to beat the drum. No longer mine to shape or mold. Your story is yours. Your hand will behold. Your hand will hold. The canvas vast, the colors bright. The journey yours to paint, to write. Each stroke you make, each stroke you make, each line you draw, will shape the life you come to saw. For life's a voyage, a winding road, a tale of choices, a heavy load. The scenes you craft, the hills you blend, will mark the path from start to end. What you create, what you design, will mirror back your soul's true sign. For in your art, your essence lie, a reflection clear beneath the skies. Your actions, thoughts, your every deed will sow the seed, will plant the creed. What you will be, what you will see, is born from what you choose to free. So, take the brush, my child, with care. The canvas waits, the world is there. Paint boldly, paint with heart and grace, and leave your own mark, your scared space. For in the end, the truth is clear. What you create is what you will bear. Your lives, the art, the work, the song. And through your hands, you will find where you belong. In the last, I thank you, all of you, to hear my speech, and welcome to give me some advice and give me some questions. So finally, I want to show you or speak to all of you my slogan when we do philosophical practice. My slogan is no thinking, no life. Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, we are back live. There are a couple of messages in the chat room. Karen has a comment, and I'm wondering, Shanti, you've done some work in the past on this, on Aristotelian virtue and in your own practice, yes? So what could you share what your reaction is to Zhiyuan's work?
Yes, I think, well, of course, it was very touching. The poems were so beautiful, and to think of a child having a father that has such a soul and such understanding is very touching. And yes, in my own work, of course, I am always pointing my clients towards the highest good, which is Aristotelian happiness, and as kind of defined by the our 21st century ideas of it, which is not just about virtue, but about the highest good that you feel you can achieve according to your own understanding of your life. So that is in consonance with what he was saying about sculpting your own self rather than being sculpted from the outside. And there's the pragmatics too, like his idea that you had to think through each situation. It's kind of pragmatic decision making. So it isn't just a thought process. You actually think about what you want to do, and then you have to carry it out and see how well it actually works. And all of that is done through a deep understanding of oneself, which gradually deepens through life. So yeah, we end up painting a similar picture with different words, and I appreciated the affirmation, of his work and mine. I felt a great consonance.
Well, thank you for that. I thought it might resonate with you. Of course, we published your work on Aristotle, and it's I think there's a great deal of convergence between what you've done and what he's done. You should know that he came with his wife and son Jack. Jack is his son's American name, of course. They had never been out of China, and they came to New York. Just they were won the award to be visiting scholar, and he was able to bring his family with him. And there was a Chinese association in New York that helps to house visiting scholars. They found a little house for him, a flat in Fort Lee, just across the river in New Jersey. And they just came lock, stock, and barrel for a year. He put his son into a public school. And within a couple of months, Jack was getting by in English and having a good time in the U.S. So it was quite, speaking of courage, I think it takes enormous courage, to do that kind of thing, which he demonstrated. But he's a very poetic soul and very creative, as you can see. So thank you for those comments. Karen, you have something in the chat room. You want to elaborate? You're somewhat of an Aristotle scholar, so tell us a little bit more about your view of his presentation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple strong elements here. One is I absolutely love poetry and was mesmerized by his poetry. And a number of years ago, I was poetic for a while. It just sort of happened, it just sort of spontaneously, poetry came from me. I haven't done it recently, but this sort of rekindles that interest. But on the other hand, um, I've had this thought brewing that this is a real general thought I haven't really mentioned to anybody, but in reference to Alistair McIntyre, who know recently has passed away, his his work After Virtue, and there's sort of a presupposition. There's sort of we learned in graduate school that there's this thing called virtue ethics. And I'm recalling to my undergraduate where I was, we had 4 years of Aristotle, so it was very important. I don't remember ever learning virtue ethics. The very word virtue, I go to ethics to find virtue. It's this peacock syndrome, I don't remember ever learning about virtue. It's happiness. He wants happiness, but yeah, so I don't know. I have lots and lots of thoughts on this. He really he lights my fire with regard to poetry and potential and touching people and all of that. But I would bet that if you dig down to very deep philosophical premises here, you come up with a different interpretation of some basic things, which uh, ultimately lead you to a different view on whether you can create yourself as God. I think that's so that's a whole lot of stuff right there. But I did like the poetry a lot.
Yeah, thank you. You should tell him. I put his email in the chat room. Okay, so I think that you see it, Pedro. You're welcome, and you're all welcome. If you pick that up at 10:26 in the chat room, just copy and paste it. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to hear anything back because he's not able to be live in the hall with us. So if you enjoyed it, if you want to question him about something, if you want to praise his poetry, I also am an admirer of his ability to wax poetic in a fairly remote second language. I mean, I can't imagine how he did this. Probably here's the LLM to the rescue. Rick is smiling, but in a good way, right? In a really good way to be able to come up with this kind of vocabulary and rhyme schemes and meter. I would not be able to do this in Mandarin. I would not even if someone paid me to do it in Mandarin. I would be too afraid to try to write poetry in a language I can't understand at all. So I mean, he does have English, of course, but to be able to produce such beautiful verse is quite a gift. Karen, I mean, we all wrote. I think all of us were encouraged to write bad verse when we were adolescents. I think most of us went through that stage, and it was a good thing to do as an exercise. But the real poets are, I think, poetic in nature, and they just it flows out of them almost effortlessly. My mother was like that. She wrote poetry all her life and never wanted anything in return, never asked anything in return. That's they're pure spirits. I think poets are most authors want something, right? Authors want what? To be read, to be published, to be acknowledged. People who write authorial pieces in prose generally have a motive. Pure poets have no motive at all, and that's why poetry is so beautiful. I think it's nature's.
Being it that they have no motive because nobody wants to read them anyway. Nobody buys for
I,
everybody.
well,
They're
I
not
think
disappointed.
it's a little nobler than that on a good day. I think it just flows out of them, and they're not writing because they want something. That's what I'm trying to say. It's really not.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, I know you do. Okay, anyone else? Would anyone else like to comment here for the record? I hope that you'll communicate again with Zhiyuan and tell him what you think. But we have some time if anyone else wants to chime in. Rick?
Just learning just now that Shanti did work on this. Now, after being inspired by him, I need to go read what Shanti wrote because I'm curious to hear more about this now.
Well, yes, and Shanti, I think at least one or two. Is it two articles, Shanti? I mean, you've published in our journal on this beautiful article that comes to mind, but maybe more than one.
Yes, I think first of all was I wanted to philosophically support my method of working with people, and so that's where I first really relied on Aristotle's, um, you know, idea that happiness was in part due to virtue. And then yes, I went back too with aging in my article on Aristotle and Jane, and how that search for happiness even at the end of one's life, she was had a kind of a progressive neurological disorder, and she was 78 and didn't know really how much longer she had to live. So, yeah, deciding together what happiness would be for her so she could die happily, and then pragmatically going through all the things that she would need to do, deciding, what order she needed to do them in. And yeah, and then through our getting to know deeply who she was through our dialogues, within really a time of a year that I saw her, 9 months actually, she achieved that state of eudaimonia. And yeah, so I think those were the two articles really that were the most strongly oriented towards Aristotle.
You're prodding my memory now. I've just put the link to our journal page in the chat room. So we do have a search function that seems to work. And if you just go to the journal page and search for Shanti or search for Aristotle, you're going to pull up her publications and maybe other things, that are also along the same lines. But I remember your work, Shanti, and it was very beautifully done. I'm a big fan of this as well. And what my students find interesting, and I do it with clients occasionally, because they don't learn virtue ethics either in school, Karen. Nobody teaches this anymore, but my students tend to love it, at least at the intro level. And because for them, it's a breath of fresh air to depolarize. Everything is good or evil. Everything is, we're in this mode. It's almost like a Zoroastrian mode where the whole cosmos is pitted, good versus evil. It's all like, may the force be with you and this kind of thing. But when students learn that virtue is actually a mean between two extremes, it makes them think in a whole different way about the vices at either end. And then we go through the exercise where, if you think of something that you consider a virtue, most of them are very good at the excess and not so good at identifying the deficiency. So it produces a lot of thought for them, and it gives them a different way, of course, to conceive of things, which is partly what education ought to do, I think. So Aristotle still has a lot of traction, at least the Nicomachean Ethics do, and is also his work, of course, on friendship is very beautiful too. Yes, that resonates with our Confucian friends also, because as some of you are well aware, the Analects begin with this idea of Confucius, how delightful to welcome friends from afar. So a friendship plays a central role in Confucian ethics, as it does also in Aristotelian ethics. And maybe that's partly what inspired Zhiyuan to become interested in Aristotle. I'll have to ask him that. Maybe one of you wants to ask. Okay, anything else? Any other questions or comments? Vaughn, please. There you
I
go.
just wanted to say, I wondered what interaction there was between the Chinese and their love of poetry and this particular philosopher and the Koreans and humanities therapy, because I know that we had a lot of poetry therapists at that first conference that we went to, international conference in Korea. And I have an article coming out in Jeanette Knox's book about the use of poetry therapy in counseling. So I think this is a topic that needs more exploration. And I'm not quite understanding the use of poetry here. It seems to be, or, for the therapist rather than the client. Although in a certain sense, the client is going to work through, I guess, the poetry that the therapist presents to him. I'm not sure how this works in this particular context.
Yeah, well, I have a little bit of light to shed on that. It's a good comment, Vaughn. I mean, the article that is in the press from Zhiyuan on this topic is much more scholarly as well as a practical application. It's a scholarly treatment of this part of Aristotle's work from his physics and from his ethics, but it's also an assessment of how, again, the practical steps would unfold in philosophical counseling. And he left the poetry out of it. So the article that's forthcoming in the journal doesn't have the poetry. And I'm seeing this video for the first time. He sent it, but I hadn't looked at it. So I think he's throwing in the poetry because he wants to share it with us. It's his spirit. It's his poetic spirit. That's my take. He just wants to be very sharing. And he knows that the article in its more scholarly context is going to appear, next month in the journal. So I think he wanted to share the poems.
Okay.
That's my take anyway. Tom, go ahead.
Speaking of Aristotle, I wanted to mention Tom Morris's book, If Aristotle Ran General Motors. I actually just recently, I'm in the car a lot, so I listen to books instead of read them. And I listened to Tom's book, Aristotle Ran General Motors, and he talks about the four pillars like truth, beauty, goodness, and unity. And I commend that to the group. I think he does a nice job of applying Aristotle to business and to practical situations. And I know Tom Morris is a friend of APA, so strongly encourage. Just wanted to mention that before we took a break.
Well, thank you very much for the mention. Yeah, Tom is a friend, and he has his own Institute for Human Values. You know, Tom was a professor at Notre Dame for many years, a professor of modal logic of all things. But Tom is a born preacher. I mean, he has the spirit, and he's very his enthusiasm is very infectious. He speaks beautifully well, and as you say, that book is what really made his mark in philosophy for business, particularly, came out exactly around the same time as Plato Not Prozac, and we were on NPR together one day. We met each other in the NPR studios in New York. On somebody remember Ray Suarez, Talk of the Nation? That was a big NPR. So we met there. He was reading Plato Not Prozac when I walked in. I had a copy of If Aristotle Ran General Motors in my briefcase. We'd been reading each other's work, and then we ended up on the air together. And Tom is a fascinating character, I think, a very beautiful philosopher and a very creative person as well. He's been writing novels lately. And we did an Agora with him. If you go to, again, Appa's channel, you'd be able to revisit that where he talks about some of the backstories of his life and work. So thank you for bringing him up.
Yeah, he's a recovering musician too, like some of us.
Yeah, that's right. He is. He is indeed. He's got a bunch of electric guitars. I think you know, a very interesting fellow, Tom Morris, and a great philosopher. Thanks for the reminder. We have a minute before the breaks. Anyone want to get one word in before we take a break? Not necessary, but if anyone has anything more to add. Again, the chat room has Zhiyuan's address there, Wang Zhiyuan 2002 at 163.com, and that will get to him. I would really be happy if some of you just send him an email to thank him, you know, or anything that you want to say or ask. Rick, last word before the break.
I already sent him an email congratulating him on his talk and his poetry and regretting that he couldn't show up, etc. So
You're a quick study, Rick. You're always ahead of us, and
we got one already, at least one.
well, at least one, and I'm sure more to come. But he'll be happy to hear from you, and thank you for that. You're the master of multitasking. No,
I met him. He when I took the training, he was in the cohort that year. Yeah.
yes, he was. That was 2017, and you know, he was in New York, and of course, that was part of his reason for being in New York. Was a kind of a
I must say, his English has gotten better. I could mostly understand everything that he said without reading, but it was good that he put the words up there because a couple of times I needed a little help. But back in 2017, I think I got half of what he was saying. His English was well, it was just, you know, practice makes perfect. That's his own theory, right? So
Absolutely right. And there is a language requirement for visiting scholars to be funded, but I think that the bar is not that high. They need to have really good comprehension, but it's as difficult for many Chinese people to pronounce English words as it is for us to pronounce Mandarin. I think we have a harder time to apologize for our total inability to speak Mandarin. It's because
yeah, and we're tone deaf when it comes to the
the
inflections.
inflections. I've had any number of Chinese people, and I'm a musician and have been all my life. I understand musical inflection well enough and linguistic inflection in our native language. But my goodness, the four inflections of Mandarin defeat me, and then beyond that, Cantonese has nine. That's too advanced. So hats off to him. I once asked his son, Jack, you know, he was around, I think around maybe 9 years old at the time, so I said, so how do you like, you know, being in the U.S.? You know, do you like America? And he said, I said, do you feel American at all after being here for a year? He said, when I'm in America, I feel American, and when I'm in China, I feel Chinese. This is out of the mouth of a 9-year-old who certainly had his identities in order. No confusion. Okay, there's one new message in the chat room. Oh, thanks to Platow Wong. Yeah, Patricia, I will. That's right. Thanks to Platow Wong and his playful poetic nature. Okay, my friends, we're on break now until 11 o'clock. Okay, please have coffee or whatever you're imbibing at this hour. Rick, I'll turn it over to you when we return. and you'll introduce Hamad Al-Reyes, and we'll look forward to Hamad's presentation. Okay, everyone, thanks again. See you in about 13 minutes, all right? Have a nice break.